Rob gives us the thumbs up. And then we'll, okay, thumbs up. And then do we have the Zoom up and going? Is Counselor Register on there? Oh, sorry, I apologize. Oh, yeah. There you go. Yep.
Welcome to Zoom. Enter your meeting ID followed by pound.
Oh, yep. There I got a text from her.
If you are the meeting host, please enter your host key followed by pound. If you are a participant, please press pound to continue. You have not entered any numbers. Please re-enter your host key followed by pound. You have not entered any numbers. Please re-enter your host key followed by pound. This host key is invalid. You will be placed into the meeting as a participant. The meeting has not started. Please wait or try again later. Enter your participant ID followed by pound. Otherwise, just press pound to continue.
It's 10:24 a.m. So you got a long. No, it's not p.m. What does it say? Oh, it does say p.m. Oh, you're right.
You are in the meeting now. There are 2 participants in the meeting. This meeting is being recorded. You are muted. You can mute or unmute yourself by pressing star 6.
I wish you were muted.
You have been added to the waiting room. You cannot talk or listen until the host admits you to the meeting. You are muted. You can mute or unmute yourself by pressing star 6.
Okay. Are we good? Almost. Okay.
You are unmuted.
So are we good now on the Zoom? Okay, awesome. Counselor Register, you there? Can you hear us?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Perfect, excellent. Okay, very good. So this is a budget workshop to just kind of tie up some loose ends for some questions that came up at the end of our last budget workshop. And actually got some really great news that we'll get to talk about today. So usually things don't go as well as you hope they would, and it went just as well, if not better, in some of the discussions I had. So excited to be able to talk about that. But I wanted to, just a few things before we get into it so I don't forget when we get to the end of the meeting. One, just a reminder about the 4th of July. Obviously, it's coming up. I know it's hard to believe, but that'll be on Monday. So we've got all the festivities in the morning and then at the park, and then the fireworks show at Brothers Park at dusk. So we're excited for that. Sonda has just been doing a terrific job of really promoting it this year, really involving the veterans. We spoke at that. I think you all know this. We spoke with the Caldwell Veterans Council and then also the Veterans Garden beginning of the year, or beginning of all this. We want to get them involved and also raise money for them. And so they're going to kind of trade years this year with the Veterans Hall, and then next year the Veterans Garden. But just want to give you an update where she is at now. This isn't the net, this is the gross, so it will come down a little bit because of expenses and things like that. But Sonda so far in just sponsorships has raised over $50,000. And like I said, you'll have expenses from T-shirts for the 5K run and things like that come out. But it's going to be a considerable amount of money that we'll be able to donate to the Caldwell Veterans this year, which is just phenomenal. When I saw that number today, I was like, wow, that's awesome. I know they're well short on the number of people they were hoping to get signed up for the 5K run. So if you're interested, it's still available. I'll be signing up later today. I know our new police chief's going to sign up. He said he'll run with me no matter how slow I go. So, that's a good idea. That's a good idea. I don't think Lieutenant Wright could go slow enough to be able to stick with me, so he'll be way out in front. Yeah, that's what I said. I can run a long ways, but it takes me a while to do it. So, yeah, just encourage anybody that you know, get that word out there that those registrations are still open. The more people we get to register, the less amount of money we have to take out of the sponsorship to pay for the things for that race. So, it gives more money back to the veterans. We're excited for that. So that was one thing. The other was, I want to talk to you about the interviews that we did today. So as you're aware, Jerome Mapp is retiring next month as our planning and zoning director. So we did hold interviews today. Myself, Mr. McDonald, who sits on the red carpet team, is heavily involved with the planning and zoning department. I was on that, and then also Council President Allgood. They went exceptionally well. We thought about, we'd love to have done an executive session to really get into it and talk about it, but with the time, it seemed like that might be tough because Friday, so much is going on already to drag everybody back down here again after being here once or twice that day. So we thought maybe it'd be best just to let you know that if you do have any questions on it, as we prepare for that name to come forward, myself and Council President Allgood stick around and talk to you kind of one at a time, just so we don't get a quorum on that if you wish, or you can talk to Council President Allgood, give him a phone call or me, and we can talk about it. I thought that might be the easiest way to do it, because if we just do it that way, we don't have to notice for an executive session on that. So rather than talking it as a group, so I thought that might be the best way to move forward, because we want to make sure you're aware of it. You have any questions on it? So if you're amenable to that, that's kind of how we'll do it. Unless you do want to set up another meeting for Friday to come down, we can do that as well. But just thought, if you do have any questions on that, we're both available and can talk at any time. So in that regards, but it was a unanimous among all three of us of who the top choice was, and they were great candidates, all of them. And so, but there was a clear consensus on that, so it's kind of nice to have that. But would love to talk to you individually, or like I said, Chris and I can get together and talk to you as well on that if you'd like to do that. So that offer is out there for sure on that. And then lastly is just a reminder about Friday that we do have the swearing in of Chief Ingram at 11 a.m. For that, and so that'll be here in this room. So we're excited for that. I talked to Chief today, and excited for that. It's going to be a great thing for the department. So looking forward to that. So anyway, just make sure that you're welcome, and love to have you here and show that support. If not, we get it. We know that there's other commitments to come up, but that'll be 11 a.m. here in this room on Friday. And that concludes. I thought I had another item, but we'll go with that for now. If I remember the other, we'll talk about it. So jumping right in, full feet on our last budget workshop at the end. If you remember, we were talking about fund balance and kind of what can we do with that, what can we do for the taxpayers, trying to see if there's any opportunity to provide some relief for them, whether that was through using some of that fund balance to reduce the levy rate and reduce, the amount of property tax we're going to take, or was it possible to keep the budget kind of the same as was proposed and provide like a property tax rebate to the citizens. It wasn't me this time, just so everybody knows. So can we do a property tax rebate, like the federal government did a few years ago or last year, whenever that was? Didn't know if that was legally possible and how we could go about that. And if we could, does that just go to everybody, or can we focus it in on, more of the homeowners that really need it, deserve it? We talked about that graph that I had last week that showed that commercial property 5 years ago, and the one, not picking on anybody specific, but looking at the neighborhood Walmart over off of U-Stick, their property taxes in 2017 were $135,000. This year, they're planned to be $65,000. The subdivision across the street in 2017 was $125,000 for the entire sub. This year, it's going to be $185,000. So they've gone up $60,000. The commercial's gone down $60,000. So we felt they're really already getting a property tax rebate, you could say. So we need to focus it on the homeowners. So just jumping right into that. So I met with Chris Yamamoto and Zach Wagner on Monday, and we actually were able to get Mike Moyle on the phone also. We were there and talked to him. Found out that there was legislation, House Bill 555. I still need to send it to Carol, and I still need to read it myself, that was just passed this legislative session that goes into effect on Friday that provides cities the ability to do property tax relief, where we can do property tax rebates, checks back to the people. And what's that? Was it 550? Okay.
I think so.
Yeah, that's probably, I think it's at 555. I think it's 550. And it also allows the city to determine who gets those rebates. It's not an all or nothing, so you can whittle it down to only homeowner exempt properties. That way you're hitting those people that are Caldwell residents, living in their homes, owning their homes in that regard. So that was great news on both of those fronts. And so they ran a report for me, because I know the last time we were here, we were talking about the number of people, and if you have so much money going to so many people, if it's 50 or $100, does that really make a difference on that? So the number of people, so the parcels within the city limits with a current homeowner's exemption is 14,688. So that's who we could focus that in on, and that would be my recommendation on that. And so depending on the amount of the fund balance that we wanted to look at to provide, and I believe we could fall anywhere within kind of that 7 million we were talking about the other day, and really even up to possible $10 million. So anywhere in that range, you would provide a $500 to a $700 rebate to those homeowner exempt properties, which is a big deal.
Yeah.
That cuts their property tax bill really down by 25% or even more, depending on, what their property tax. If they have a $2,000 payment on their property tax bill, $500, that's 25% right there. So that's a big deal. We're looking into the timing of it. Ideally, we'd love to do that. We thought November would be a great time to do it. We got to look into the logistics and see if there's requirements as far as the timing of it from the state legislature. But November would be great because property tax bills due in December. Obviously Christmas is right around that time, and so to get that check in the mail that month before would just be awesome. And so looks like we can do it. We're just trying to figure out the dates of it, when that can be done. And then so a couple of great things on that. One, it allows the budget as proposed, with those raises that we have for the employees, the new positions, to carry forward as is, but still also providing that property tax relief to the citizens before they have to start paying those property taxes. And so that kind of preserves those things as we've discussed and as moved forward, and then being able to provide for those new positions. So really kind of a win-win all around in that regards, and it's had to be a great thing to be able to give some of that money back. We've seen a big boon in the city from ARPA money that's come in, sales tax revenues being above, and this also allows that other nice thing. It gives us time to figure out. We don't have to decide this tonight. It allows us time to look at that fund balance and kind of decide, and have some more of these meetings in the future of, what can we pull out of the fund balance to provide in there, see where those sales tax revenues end up coming back. We know where we project them to be, but we can, wait until we have a very firm 100% number of how high we were on that, and that could add even more money into that pot that we can give back to the people. And then just do whether that means we do a budget amendment, at some time to move some of that fund balance around, or however that works, in that regards. And then that leads in, and I'll finish up here and then open it up for questions, comments, anything like that, discussion. So what that does lead to, and this again can be a win-win, I think, for our finance department. As I've talked with Carol, and again, kudos to her and to Rochelle and their department of what they've been able to do. And as I've continued to learn on so much more getting done with so much little of resources of what they have. So this would create, doing these rebate checks, we should be able to hire a third party to do that, because we can't have the county just, because that was talked about, could we just write a check to the county and then do it? No, we would have to do it. So we can look into hiring a third party to be able to cut those checks, send those checks out. But it does put extra workload onto the finance department, where they have to track that. So legally, let's say 10,000, well, now let's just say 10,000 for an even number. 10,000 checks go out, 9,000 get cashed. You got 1,000 checks floating out there, and there's going to be a number of those that you have to track those. You have to try to track the people down, find out if they received it. If not, when are they going to cash it, and follow that for 12 months. And then at the end of that 12 months, those checks that have not been cashed, we don't get the money back. It goes into, and Carol can correct me if I'm wrong on any of this, but it goes into the unclaimed property fund or something like that at the state, and then they do whatever they do with it, and they keep it. They don't give it back to us. So, but that's got to be tracked for that 12 months, which creates even more work on an already overworked staff load. So creates the possibility of creating a position for Carol's department to be able to help track that, and then there's plenty of work for that person to do. So as I talked with Carol before she came in, the prior finance director, so there was him, Carol below him, and then Rochelle. When he retired, they felt there wasn't any need to replace one of those positions, so Carol moved to his position, Rochelle moved to Carol's, and then that position where Rochelle was at just stayed vacant and went away because they didn't think they needed it. They have more work that they're doing than before with less people. So the proposal would be to refill that position, recreate it so that they can have that extra person to help them because they're in dire need of that. So that's the good news that's come out of all this, an opportunity to talk to Carol and discover that. And yeah, they could definitely use it for what they've been doing. It's a little, and then also, I know that this kind of rolls into the question that Councilor Williams had about the bond rating, and Carol can go into more detail on this. To help our bond rating, there's things that we can do and have been doing in regards to, because you get, I guess, dinged. And what's the term that you used the other day? Yeah, like, but there was a better term. I can't remember. A finding. There we go. A finding. Finding is not a good thing in your audit, and so they've been able to do things in-house to eliminate those findings, and Carol can go in that more detail, which helps our bond rating because that just gives us a better score when we're doing those things ourselves, which is great. But now you're looking at even more work that Carol and Rochelle have been doing with one less staff person. So that's kind of, I guess, where we're at on that. So I think that's some really good news, and I'll obviously turn it over to Carol to go over in some more detail on that stuff, and then open up for comments, questions, thoughts from the council on all those items. Okay.
Here it is. I forgot what side this was on. Somebody changed the sides on me on this. We'll try it. Is that better? We'll just hold it. Okay, so you guys sent me with a long to-do list last Tuesday night, and I did do some of it, but I don't have answers for you tonight. What I do know is I sent out an email to my auditors. As I stated, they're out on sabbatical, so I'm waiting for a response. I have not heard back from them to talk about what does it look like for a reduction in our fund balance. What are they looking at to make sure we are maintaining some sort of healthy fund balance policies? So just looking to them for some guidance on that. Bond rate, the mayor kind of touched on a couple items with bond rates. I reached out to Mike Kane, who is an attorney who was on our negotiation team with the fire union, and he referred me back to our legal, and so I still need to meet with Mark Hilty to talk about bond rates and how does that get affected when you have a reduction in your fund balance. So, and I do have a meeting coming up in 2 weeks with the banker who did the bonding for, with Banner Bank who did the bonding for urban renewal bonds, to kind of talk to them to see how much emphasis do they put on fund balances when they're looking at bonding us. The mayor talked to the county. I still need to read House Bill 555 to understand the implications and ramifications of what happens when we give this rebate and everything that's involved in that. I did reach out to all my finance directors, peers here within the valley, and ask them for fund balance policies that they may have in place for their cities. So I did receive something back from the city of Meridian, the city of Boise, and then of course I had the city of Nampa since I worked there, so I had that one with me. Have not had a chance to read through them to know what they're doing with fund balance and what their limitations are and what guidelines they set, but I did receive some. Urban Renewal, you asked Urban Renewal to speak tonight, so Jim Porter is here tonight to talk to you what happens to Urban Renewal and what projects that we may have to look at cutting if we reduce the levy rate even more. So he's prepared to talk on that if that is something you guys have additional questions for. So to touch back to the The mayor's point on this House Bill 550 or 555, whichever it is, I still need to read it. I didn't realize we had that going through legislature this year, so I was not tracking it. I don't have any information on it. But ironically enough, I did get an email from the city of Boise talking about that they're going to take and do this rebate. So I have many questions to them and trying to set up a meeting with them to talk about what they're doing and how they're managing through giving that rebate. In their email, they did say that they're doing it for circuit breaker people, and what they did say is they're learning that you can't do the rebate until maybe June, till after your second payment that you receive. So those are still things we need to learn to find out if Boise's statement to me is true. They're talking about a $1.2 million rebate over there in their community from the email I got from him. I'm going to take a drink real quick. Hold on.
And real quick, while Carol's doing that, and I'm interested to see how they're doing that on the circuit breaker, because when I was speaking with Mike and Chris and Zach, they said that actually with the circuit breaker you can't, because circuit breaker is where you submit an application to the state, they review it, and if approved, they pay your property tax for you. And this bill specifically said that you can't basically give people money that aren't paying. So if you're not paying property tax, then obviously you can't get a property tax rebate because you didn't pay anything. So I don't know how Boise's or what they're thinking there with that, because if you're just doing it for circuit breakers, they're not paying property tax. So you're basically just giving them money. That's why we would actually take out the circuit breakers that are doing it, and not that we're trying to pick on them, but they're not paying property tax. We want this to go to the people in Caldwell paying property tax. So I'm not sure how Boise's doing that, because I know Mike kind of got fired up when we were talking to him about it, about if Boise is trying to do that, because they specifically try to make it where you can't just hand free money out to people. It needs to be rebating something they're actually paying.
And if I understand it right, the number of people on circuit breaker in Canyon County or in Caldwell is a pretty small number. Very small.
Yeah, I would guess. I didn't get that number, and I can reach out to them and get that number on it. So, but yeah, so we want this focused on property tax, people that are paying that live in Caldwell. Yeah. Sorry, Carol.
Nope, you're good.
Yeah.
And so as the mayor identified, he did talk to me about, the things that he had learned from the county. And so what I explained to him is that if we have to cut the checks, that's a lot of check cutting on our part. I don't know everything involved on what we need to do, the information we need to get, how we need to set up these people in our system, because we would have to set up 14,000 people in our system as vendors so that we can create a check for them. Then we'd have to input all the data. And then those that do cash the checks, great, a lot of bank reconciliation going on there. If those people don't cash the checks, then we have a lot of tracking involved that we need to track and follow these people. We have to provide to the State Tax Commission that we've done due diligence and trying to reach out to them. So then we're having to, as we use the example of 1,000 people, if there's 1,000 people that don't cash those checks, we have to spend the time to find them. We have to go through and show the State Tax Commission we've done due diligence and trying to find them, and what our processes of locating them or not locating them. And then we have to then turn the money over to the State Tax Commission for those uncashed checks.
Well, for what it's worth, whether or not we end up issuing the checks, I'm in support of getting in an additional person either way. So.
And as the mayor did explain, when I hired on, there was 3 people in finance. Payroll and accounts payable are not finance people. The team that we have in place are very good people. They know their job and they do their job very well, but they're not finance people. So when the previous finance director retired and I promoted up, we promoted Rochelle up along with that as well. So her position kind of just went away. We absorbed those duties internally amongst ourselves. We tried to share them with payroll. We tried to share them with accounts payable. And we were just finding that that was just coming back to us. So if you want to talk about a finance team, it's a finance team of 2. Well, my department has 5 people in it. It's a finance team of 2 people. We have taken the City of Caldwell's audit report from having several findings to 0 findings in the past 3 years. So our audit report no longer has findings on it at this time. One of the findings on that report was that the auditors wrote that report. And that's a finding, because they're auditing their own work and then they're writing the report on their own work. So we have now taken on that duty of performing that audit report and writing it and creating it and presenting it to you amongst the two of us. Not only do we write the City of Caldwell's audit report, we also write the Urban Renewals audit report, and we also write the Health Trust audit report. So we have taken 4, counting the grant audit report now too that we have to write. So we have 4 audit reports that we write in a 3-month time period, just amongst 2 people. So it's a lot of work, but taking that finding off that audit report does provide the city to be in a better place when we do go to bond, that we can show we do not have findings on that audit report. Same thing with the single audit. We've taken the single audit, which is the grant report, down to 0 findings as well. Again, by trying to do things in-house instead of having the auditors perform certain duties. The other item on the audit finding report that we have now taken away is we have our HRA VIBA program. We have to have it actuarial certified, and then we have to provide 3 pages of footnotes on that report, and we have to do calculations based upon that report when it comes back. So, HRA VIBA, it's a health reimbursement account. So when somebody, you have to retire. If you terminate from the city, you don't get it. You have to retire, and you have to be PERSI qualified retire. So we have to get documentation from PERSI. And then there's a chart that identifies age and years of service. So, and that now has to be actuarial certified. That's a new GASB standard that we have implemented to get that finding off of our report. Another GASB standard that we are now working on is lease tracking, and so Rochelle is in the process right now of implementing a new software that we need to have in order to comply with the newest GASB standard for lease tracking and reporting. So there's another additional piece that we now have to perform on our audit. So those are just some things that finance is doing with 2 people. But by removing all those findings off of that audit report, it puts the city in a better position to seek bonds, to go for bond rating. So not only does it help with bond rating, it helps with obtaining grants as well.
So real quick, I'll just throw this in here. So this bill is really simple, which is unusual. Usually they're pages and pages. It's only 1 page and a paragraph. Yeah, just really 1 page. So yeah, good job. Way to be concise. So, so it basically says, City Council voting to issue such property tax rebate shall pass an ordinance describing the total amount appropriated for the program, providing instructions and a deadline for property taxpayers to apply for the rebate, and setting forth the formula for determining the tax rebate amounts. So I don't see anything about dates or times, so you just have to give a deadline for it. So people do have to apply for it. So we can get the names and addresses from the assessors or from the Idaho State Tax Commission, it says here, and then we would send letters to them saying, you qualify for this rebate for this amount, please send in your notification. That does create more work.
There'll probably be a better way, that way you're not cutting all these checks in that
Yeah.
goes out to the state.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's a good point. If they apply, then they should be looking for it. So they will need to apply for it, so we will need to get some, obviously, coverage on that to get that out so people are aware of that. Then once we get those requests back in, then those checks would be cut. And so here are the limitations. I'll just read one. There's only 3 of them. But the one says the total amount of any rebate by the city plus any amount paid on behalf of the applicant by the state of Idaho, which would be your circuit breaker, through the property tax reduction program may not exceed the amount of property taxes payable by the property owner on the applicable property, which would mean that you cannot pay, if they've got the circuit breaker that's paying their taxes, you can't also give them that money as well. It has to be that minus that cannot equal an additional number, if that makes sense.
So this kind of leads me to think we wouldn't know how much their property tax bill is until after they receive it, which then takes us past that November date of being able to issue rebates. There's no way to know that property value or property tax assessment, to know how much to rebate back to them.
But I just wonder if we could use last year's numbers if we had to on it. You know what I mean? Like we may not know their numbers this year, but we know their numbers. But then I guess you might be doing for people that moved or something.
Paid it.
My assumption would be the dollar amount would be the same for every individual across the board.
Yeah.
You wouldn't prorate it in any fashion.
Yep.
So somebody on a circuit breaker may be paying $150 a year because the state is paying the rest of their money. So if they're only paying $150 a year, we wouldn't want to send them a $500 check. So, again, last year would be the thing, but I don't know how you could send circuit breaker people money, period, because I don't think any of them pay $500.
Yeah, and I don't think we would, yeah, we can look into it, because
Well, maybe you can write it that way, the ordinance, that circuit breaker is out. Sounds like you can split it up by this bill, right?
Yep. And I thought the circuit breaker was kind of all or nothing, maybe they do pay just portion, so that's something we'd wanna look into, or do they, okay. So.
Mhm. Yeah, the circuit breaker provides for not a full payment of their taxes. It provides
On the
for a,
application, you could ask, are you on the circuit breaker, so how much
Yep.
are you obligated to pay?
So.
Yeah. That'd be easier to write it that way.
Okay. Yeah.
To me is we're kind of getting into pretty specific discussion about this idea. If our city attorney isn't here, it sure would be nice to be able to ask Mark or Douglas the answer to some of these questions, especially as we're getting into how this would look, how this would actually function, right? So just a moment ago, we talked about, and Mayor, I think you read the code. They have to apply, right? And so I would be interested to know, does that have to be by letter that we send to them? Could there be other methods of notification, such as, the first thing that comes to mind for me is the water bill. Doesn't sound like you could send it in every water bill, right? Only the 14,000 that you noted, Mayor. So I'm just thinking there's a lot of details still left to figure out on this. I wish, I didn't anticipate this kind of detail. Maybe it'd be better to have Mark and Doug help walk us through some things, but
Well, and as we discussed earlier, we could do this
Yep.
today, it's not part of the budget, so.
Yeah.
I just think there's a lot of the old adage, the devil's in the details, right? Sounds interesting, it sounds great, it sounds like it might be a good way to get money back in people's pockets, but a lot of dots to connect before we can make that happen. Especially when to my knowledge, nobody's really tried this yet, other than the city of Boise's talking about doing something perhaps similar. Some guidance from our legal counsel, I think, will be valuable moving forward.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Just a question for clarification. It sounded like when you were talking, these would be rebates, so we wouldn't be changing our levy rate. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct, so. Yep.
So that would be important to factor in as well, I think, right?
Yeah, I think so too. That's where, going, because we kind of talked about last time, if we weren't able to do this and we dip that levy rate down, it affects other things. It affects the library, because that's what their levy rate's based on, and other programs as well. And then you get that one-time dip, but then next year it's gonna go right back up to where it was. And even though it may be the same as it was the year before the dip, people, the way they think, they're gonna just remember last year's and be like, whoa, wait a minute, the council just jacked my taxes way up. Even though we didn't, we just gave them a 1-year relief. And so, yeah, there we go. Sorry, the mayor. That's exactly right. That is what they would say. So,
I think that's why our conversation moved away from that quite quickly, didn't it?
Yeah, I think so too. Where this allows to still give that rebate to them in this form. So I think it's just perfect timing on that. And that's where, where it's mentioned, and Jim can obviously still speak if he wants to, but it wouldn't affect anything of the projects that they have planned, because that levy rate would stay the same as what's
Okay,
proposed.
so that was my next follow-up then,
Mhm.
so it doesn't affect URA like it might have.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, and like kind of was mentioned too, the nice thing is, yeah, and I agree with Counselor McGee, there's a lot of details, things like that, but again, the nice thing is, we don't have to sit here till midnight tonight trying to figure those out. We just know that, and it's nice that, the public, there's not, probably maybe one person watching this right now, but hopefully the public can know, yes, there's relief coming, the city council is planning on doing this, we just are trying to figure out the details, see how much money we can get back to the citizens.
So just to rehash, 'cause what exactly do we need to decide tonight?
So again, this is just a workshop, so there's no final decisions made. This is just to be able to allow us to have continued talks to see, well, to find out if this was possible, because if this wasn't possible, then yeah, there'd be a lot more discussion about the budget. Now, do we have to amend it, change it, do all these things before it comes back formally? But if this seems to be what the council was hoping for and looking for, then that kind of simplifies that and says, okay, the budget was good, let's continue moving on that. We're gonna look into this further and plan on doing this within the next couple months, and just get those kind of details hammered out between now and then.
And then, Mayor, if memory serves from the last meeting, the importance and I guess the time pressure here is that Carol's got to get Debbie our proposed path forward on. And what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, to the wall, yeah.
That's what the pressure is here, right?
Yeah.
Well,
And
yes,
I-
that
and
is
I-
the pressure right now, is to get that budget, giving me that direction that says, what I have presented to you in our budget workshops and the changes that have come out of these workshops, besides this one, is we're good with what I presented to you. We feel confident and comfortable that the budget that you have had before you is a budget you wish for us to carry forward with. And the items that were presented to you with the request for the personnel people, will now be in that new budget. It wasn't in the draft budget because we didn't have your approval or nod to say, yes, we would like to see these positions added to your city budget. So those positions are now being implemented. Mary Kay and I have worked through those, on getting them into the budget. We've uploaded them. So now it's just a matter of fine tuning, working with the rest of the departments to make sure we can get everybody balanced now. And get the allocations where they need to be, so we can give you a budget and I can get it to Debbie in 3 weeks.
And I think also with the addition of that one new staff person for your department.
I'll have Mary Kay
added
add
into
that.
And you'll see some of those, because some of those we need sooner than later. So you'll see some of those coming on a consent item, I would imagine, within the next one or two council meetings to create those positions now rather than waiting till October, because they're needed now, some of those.
I guess, so I'm trying to get here, right? I still think there's a lot of information we need. Let's say hypothetically that we give this information to Carol gives it to our clerk, and Carol gets a message, or Carol finds out from the auditors, and whenever you're able to meet with them after that, that this approach would negatively affect our bond rating. Now, is it my understanding, once this information gets there, can you unwind that? Can you say, hey, we may have missed something here? What action could we take if there's something unexpected?
Sure. So right now, the budget you have, with the requested use of fund balance from these departments, do not have any effect on this property tax rebate. What we would be learning from the auditors from other meetings is what happens when we use the mayor's example of that 10 million unassigned fund balance, and we use it all to give it to the property taxpayers for rebates. What happens? Well, you have no fund balance if you're going to use all 10 million, I will tell you that. Do we have 10 million? We have 10 million right now, but do we have 10 million when September 30th hits? I don't know. So I don't know if we're gonna land at 10 million on September 30th. But I do know what's been requested in the budget, because when everything starts working its way through, the fund balance that you have at the end of this fiscal year will then be what you define through a fund balance policy, because that's probably something we really need to define, is a fund balance policy before we go and start giving rebates to know how far we want to take this down, any of your unassigned fund balance.
Yeah, and that's the exact right there, hammer on the head, is that creating a fund balance policy that we need to follow. 'Cause yeah, the goal is not to take it to zero, 'cause that would just be not smart at all. But the goal is to combine all the multiple accounts of fund balances that we can to show truly what that is. 'Cause, you know, there's the 4.5 million that's in one category that really could go away completely, and you still have that, that's not even touching that 10 million, that's sitting there. So there's a lot, and so there's a lot of things that's still to be worked out and looked at that, yeah, but the goal would not to be to wipe it out completely. Just having a healthy, what you consider to be a healthy fund balance. Everybody's gonna think differently on that. And then, on the bond rating too, obviously the more money you have in the bank, the better your bond rating is gonna be. But the question is, do you want $100 million sitting in the bank to have a AAA bond rating? Or do you want $10 million in the bank with still having an A bond rating? It's gonna be lower, but I think you gotta figure out what's that equilibrium, because if you have $100 million in the bank, who cares what your bond rating is? Because you're never gonna bond because you're paying cash for everything. So you've gotta kind of figure out where's that equilibrium where, yeah, it's gonna come down some because our cash balance is going down, but there's gotta be that point of that nexus, you know what I mean, where it gets to a point where it doesn't make any more sense to go lower because that's gonna hurt our bond rating. But again,
I agree, Mayor, I agree with everything you just said, but one of the concerns I have is, under this scenario, as you mentioned at the last budget meeting, we would in the future rely more on bonding for projects, right? Much more so than we do now, and so that, to your point, if the cost of borrowing money goes up, we're also bonding for more projects at the same time. So we just need to be mindful of that as we move forward, because that could cost the city hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on projects as we move forward, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, we're shifting the way that we've done things for a long time, and that's not bad, right? There's a time and a place for everything. My concern moving forward is we just need to understand what all of those mean and have enough money in the bank that, so if something does go wrong, or we go into a recession and our tax receipts are less, that we're able to kind of do the things that we need to be able to do, pay our employees, do roads, things like that. So I'm just very cautious. This is the bold move, and it can be bold, right? It's just we need to make sure that we totally understand what the ramifications are when we make this shift.
Yeah, no, I agree, and I agree. It is a bold move, but you can do a smart bold move rather than just going haphazard and knocking things over. So I agree that you just gotta look at it, look at all the angles, and then feel good about it in doing that. So,
and I think part of it is, Mayor, I think you and probably Councilman Doty have looked at this a lot. And for some of us, the only time that we've looked at this has been the first budget meeting, and now for a half hour tonight. So I guess that's a little bit of I just need to find some comfort in making sure that we're crossing all the T's and dotting all the I's. That's all.
Yeah. So, and I think that's good. Yeah.
Mayor, I think, just to dovetail off what Mr. McGee said, I think the taxpayers would be more satisfied too with bonding versus somebody else making the decision for them. I mean, that's always been a big contention relative to how the city operates and everything, so I think it's a plus there. More bonding, I think the better off we're gonna be, because it's their decision, so.
Yeah.
And I would just say, even on.
I have
Go ahead, Councilor Register.
if he's done, I have a couple.
We're gonna let you go first.
Okay, I I was just gonna say, as far as, the fund balance, like what you keep in there, there is a recommendation by, I think, the Association of Cities that gives cities a recommendation of how much they're supposed to have in there during good economic times versus bad economic times. So they would be a good resource for that, at least to find out, what the recommendation is. And then my other question is, like, I'm all for giving back to the, as far as the property tax is concerned, with all these things ironed out and we have a clear path and all that kind of stuff. But my other question is if that money is all used to go back to the taxpayers, then does that wipe out any chance of those raises, like that we could talk about over however, the next year or two or whatever, to bring the police up to average, or what happened with fire negotiations?
So yeah, no, that's a great question. I'm glad you brought that up. So, and I think kind of where I was going to go with what I think you just mentioned is that is going to be continued conversations and looking at next year. I think we've done some great things this year, 10% across the board, plus that 2% that's coming in October. So that's a 12%, just over a 12% raise to what they were making at the beginning of the year. And then letting that go for this budget cycle and then next year. And we've already kind of begun this with our fire negotiations and looking at how do we start to augment their salaries even more going into next budget cycle. And we do the same for the police. And and I think the goal, and again, this is where we would work with the fire department, work with the police. At least I know the goal in the negotiations has been, and Brad can chime in too, he's been on those, is creating some separation between, like the captain positions, the battalion chief positions to in firefighters coming in, where there's a little bit more separation on that. And I think that may be similar to what we want to do in the police department, creating some separation, giving those raises to those, the sergeants and the lieutenants. So there is that gap between, because there should be a gap between, a starting firefighter and the captain, then also between like the captain, the battalion chief, and the deputy chiefs. Right now, if I'm not mistaken, I think there's several captains and battalion chiefs that make more money, quite a bit more than our deputy chiefs. And so how do we fix that and get that? So we're definitely looking at that. But the thought is, we've done I'd say a really good job this year of augmenting some salaries. And it's nice because the employees, well, yeah, we'd always want more, right? But the cool thing is they see that. They've heard it. Now they've seen it in action. So I think you'll see that if we tell them, look, did this year, we're going to continue to look at it next year, they're going to have a trust in the council that they're going to do that. It's not just them telling this is down the road, we'll see what happens. You guys made it happen this year. I think they have confidence knowing that it's going to be looked at again next year and continue to doing those things. Just my take on it.
I agree with you. I've had some people who have worked for the city for, years and years and years and years, who have said that this council's done more for them in 6 months than they've seen in their entire tenure with the city. So I think that's a real compliment to how everything's going and everybody's working together. And some of those challenges that we bring to each other is actually working because we're making each other think and work for it and do things and get around stuff and all that kind of thing. But that 2% that you mentioned on top of the 10%, is that for fire and police, or how did that work out?
So, Councilor Richards, so that's what they call the KRA, and don't ask me for what that means, but that would be for all, and that is something that through evaluations, as long as you meet the criteria, every staff member in the city can receive that if they meet their minimum requirements for evaluations. Fire, police, and all employees. Oh, not fire, sorry, yes, that's correct. Police and the rest of the employees.
Yeah. Fire's already had their
Fire
negotiations.
coming up. Yep, we're working on the fire one right now with the negotiations.
And Mr. Mayor, I've heard the term wiping the funds out a couple of times. I just want to make it clear that that's certainly not my intent to wipe all the funds out. It's finding that balance with guidance from everything we've heard tonight as to what that number needs to be. So we're not taking the accounts down to zero and then someone gets a flat tire and we can't fix it. In addition, to know that all the other accounts, streets, roads, and whatever have their own special accounts, those aren't in the ones we're touching by law, so those would still have their fund balances. So that might help clarify some things, so.
Yeah.
And something, this is more long-term, but I think to your point, Councilman, we should consider and have discussion about, do we just create a rainy day account, much like the state does, where you put money into just a general rainy day account, so that we have more flexibility should that rainy day come, right? Right now, we don't have quite as much flexibility, right? We do it agency by agency. Certainly taking some of these fund balances will give us that flexibility for this year's budget. But I think in general, it would probably be a good idea for us to have a workshop perhaps at some point. Not now, Carol, I know. But
Tomorrow. We'll get you on the.
maybe you could have that for us tomorrow, Carol.
You got it.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just, I think examining whether or not just a general rainy day account would be an effective tool to help govern the city, in my view. I don't know the answer.
Yeah, no, I think that's a great point, trying to consolidate and get it into that, and looking at that would be a good thing.
And I'm just gonna throw some
Yeah.
thoughts out for you guys. As the mayor's talked about, maybe we do some sort of rebate in November, December. I'm gonna set some boundaries with you guys. That's not a good time for finance. While you are offering us a wonderful opportunity to have a new position, but by the time we get that position on and hired, we are in audit. And trying to establish 14,000 people, or however many people apply for this, we still would have to create an application, still have to work through with you guys what your criteria is going to be. So I would like to say that November really is not a realistic opportunity to maybe look at that credit, but perhaps we can shoot towards something in the spring.
And I mean, also to look at what can we outsource for that? Can we hire an outside firm to do a lot of that work, for that? Because I think obviously that's gonna be an extra cost, but if that's possible, to bring in, a third party, whoever that is or whatever, obviously they need to meet certain qualifications and things like that. If that's possible, I think, at least from my opinion, it'd be worth looking into and paying that extra cost just to be able to get those out sooner, if it was possible to do that and take that out of your hands on that. Just my thoughts.
So, Mr. Mayor, I've got like a whole bunch of things.
Yeah.
I've just been having a hard time keeping my mouth shut. I'm a rainy day guy. Yeah, for one. So,
I just want to encourage Chris to lean into his microphone so I can hear him.
okay. Is this better, Diana?
Oh, yeah. Oh, so much better. So much.
It's just, we thought my mic was on this whole time, apparently it wasn't. Anyway, glad you can hear. So, and if I'm saying things you already know, I apologize, but I just want to make it really clear. The discussion we're having about fund balance and rebates has absolutely nothing to do with the budget we're submitting. And so, the budget we're submitting, that Carol will submit to the county with our L2 and all that, will have nothing to do with our fund balance or the rebates we're discussing. So in years past, and please clarify for me, Carol, when we have passed a budget, there hasn't been a lot of times that we've actually taken the full 3%. We have taken less than the 3%. Taking the 3% is maximum, and that is what we're discussing this year. So as far as tax purposes go, we're taking everything we can take this year, which is a big number. I don't know the difference between general fund or property tax last year and this year. Do you have those numbers, Carol?
This year, we're asking for 1.4 million, which is the max we can get per the L2 calculation. We're not maxing out at the 8%. We're only reaching 7% between new construction and the 3%. So that gets us to the 1.4 million increase to our property tax budget. The previous year, I believe it was less than 1.2, 1 point something and some change in our increase last year.
Okay.
And last year we did max out.
We did max out last year.
Yes. So
okay. We
weren't able to take the full amount. This year we're able to take the full amount and we're not maxing.
Yes, we hit that. When you say we maxed out, we hit that 8% number.
Correct.
But we didn't take the full 3% on the levy rate.
Last year, yes.
Last year we did.
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So anyway, I wanted to make sure everybody was aware that with the discussion we're having tonight about the budget that we're going to give to Carol to process, is we're increasing our general fund budget by $200-some thousand or whatever over last year. 9%,
We're increasing our overall property tax budget,
correct,
yes.
by,
And not necessarily just the general fund, but it's an
Right.
increase to all of those funds that do have a levy rate that are in the budget that receives property tax revenues.
and so, because, you know, the conversation is always property tax and helping the property taxpayer. And as a council, we're up against exactly not being able to hire employees, not being able to keep employees, but at the same time trying to keep taxes down, but I'm concerned that the two discussions are getting confused. That, you know, people are talking about rebates and fund balances, but that's not what's gonna hit the tax rolls. What's hitting the tax rolls is 20-some employees and a 10% pay raise. And I just want us to be cognizant of that. And then what Counselor Register said, well, this council has done more in 6 months than the last councilor has done. I really take offense to that because it was the last council and the last city employees that built to this. The only way we can do what we're doing is because we have ARPA funds and urban renewal sunsetting this year, or we couldn't afford what we're doing. That would not have been available last year or any year previous to that. So, it is on the backs of people who've been here a long time and built us to this point that we're able to do this. And I am very happy that we're able to do this. This is very necessary, not knocking it. But, this has been a long time coming that we're having the ability to do the things we're doing during this budget session. Anyway, did I make my point?
I think so. Well stated. Any other comments or questions or? Okay, is there any other discussion, any other items or?
I have one more, Mayor.
Yes.
One of the things that we did not complete, and we talked about this at the very, very beginning, was your Republic Services credit, that $31,356 credit. You were to think on projects that you were perhaps wanting that credit to go towards, and I'm just looking for what the project might be so we can prepare and move forward.
I know the original discussion was Lions Park, adding it to that. Is that still amenable to?
In
That
a
was like a-
nutshell, remind us exactly what that.
A berm for the
So that's
noise.
money that we get returned from Republic Services?
I'm
Oh,
sorry,
sorry.
the Lions Park, what it would be used for, Lions Park.
So I know on Brankenship and they need irrigation done there. There's no pressure irrigation, if I'm not mistaken. Some new, I think, play equipment, just general improvement. Oh, and also I know the berm was discussed to try to create some sound barriers without putting up the wall, doing a berm or some landscaping.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, that's exactly right. It's just some of those general improvements that would enhance the park, for the patrons that use that park there. A restroom was just recently built at that park to replace the old restroom, which was in very poor condition. But there are some other things. The berm was a big deal to try to reduce, some of the sound from the interstate. And then, there were some other, possibly a playground, definitely some pressurized irrigation so we don't have to flood irrigate anymore.
Then just quickly, Mayor, this is probably, well, I'll just ask both of you. So under the expansion of the interstate, is there a plan to put sound walls in that area at any point? Has there been any initial discussion about that?
Thanks, Mr. Mayor and Councilman McGee. Yeah, there are sound walls planned for the opposite side of the interstate. And they've been through a substantial process. The state of Idaho has a policy that they're required to adhere to. It's a policy they create, and they submit it to the Federal Highway Administration. And then once it's approved, they have to live by that policy until they amend and get it approved.
Right.
So under that policy, they're working on an update now, but under that policy, they sent out mailers, they knocked doors, they visited people, and the end game was, based on the formulation that policy sets up, is that a sound wall was required on the north side of the interstate. Kind of the chagrin of some of the businesses, actually, that are on the north side. And then on the south side, that it would not be included. I think our hope as a city was, at the time, was we wanted to throw our vote towards not having those businesses be obscured, that were like, wait, you're gonna kill our business if you cover us up with a sound wall. And the mentality that those properties that are most near the interstate probably will ultimately redevelop into commercial. But and they're required in that policy to listen to renters, and the property owners get some vote too. So if you have a rental occupied house close to the interstate, the property owner may say, well, my vote's this way, and the renter might vote another way, and they're both valid and included in that process. They are looking at some possible lightweight reconsideration of that, but I just have to tell you, it's unlikely to change.
Yeah, I guess, Mayor, I guess we don't have to go through you, but I'm used to doing it. I guess that really answers my question, because it's not a temporary solution, especially if there's no sound wall planned on the south side. This is more of a permanent noise reduction solution.
Right, yeah, and we have talked to ITD a little bit. There are some things that may help. Part of the improvements that they're just working on the design of right now include a unique curb section. So the curb section between the interstate and our frontage road, which exists now, but they'll be widening, right? So they'll be coming closer to our frontage road. Their curb section actually has a higher back, and so it may help to deflect some of that sound out. But we have noticed we have a berm over part of this park, and the sound is way less where there's not a direct line of sight from the wheels contact surface with the asphalt or the concrete to your ears. That berm helps to take a lot of that sound, and having a rounded shape to it and a scattered shape to it, grass instead of concrete, also probably helps to attenuate and dissipate that sound more. Sound walls are known for actually sending sound out to longer distances away to some extent, because it's a nice, flat, rigid surface and it reflects the sound really well.
Brent, you're so smart. I don't know what the word attenuate means, but
Ask me if you can spell it though. That's
whatever you said, I agree with.
So, and I think kind of the point you're trying to make is, if they're putting a sound wall up, why are we going to build a berm, right? Okay. So, that's a thought.
I know this is off subject, but I was part of those discussions because the city had a vote as well, because we own Lions Park. And I can't remember, I know people living 1 block from the freeway had more of a significant vote than people living 4 blocks away from the freeway. And I can't remember how that came to pass, because I thought there was pretty lengthy discussion on it. Do you remember that, Brent?
Yeah, there was significant discussion about it, and there was significant concern from business owners to the city. And that really influenced the city at that time to vote its handful of votes against the noise walls. They now call them, they've always called them sound walls in the past. They changed the nomenclature to noise walls recently, but hoping that we could be influenced helping those businesses not have, and that didn't succeed.
Okay, very good. Any other? Yeah, Councilor Williams.
Pastor Porter and her husband are here tonight, and I just want to
well stated.
Sure, because we did ask him to come prepared, and I want to be sure all your questions, if you had any, were answered, or if you had something to say, I just want to be sure we give you that opportunity.
If you so desire.
Perhaps, Pastor, you could come attenuate some of your thoughts.
Councilor Williams, the one that opened up this can of worms. So, yeah, that's right. Let's get it. I got it here somewhere. So
We started it when you got up.
yeah.
What I came prepared with tonight was just kind of an overview of the projects that we have in the hopper, so to speak. We've got our 2022 projects that are already within our budget, of course, and a lot of them are underway. Just want to remind you that although urban renewal kind of gets this portrayal of being something big, ugly, and nasty and kind of ogreish. There are 95 urban renewal allocation areas in the state, with 44 municipalities. I mean, this is a tool that's used. Caldwell, certainly, with Ron Caldwell. Hard work that went into this, and here it again, an example of what urban renewal can do when it's working well. So within the next, within this year, slide so I can. Mondays I don't get this, you know. So, Mike, the concern was, after the last budget meeting, was going to be with the reduction in income, lowering of the levy rate, we were going to have to really dive deep into the list of projects and look at things that were liable to have to be cut or unfunded or scaled back like that. In this year's projects, we have the benefit site remediation. There's budget in that budget. We're hopeful that the site won't need as much remediation as some of the other sites in the downtown area. It's looking good at this point, but we won't know until a developer actually gets it. We've got a series of moving park projects that are fun to talk about. And you know, there's a certain faction of pickleball fans that are passionate about that. But that's just.
Jody has that all figured out.
I'm going to do the first tournament there. I am.
Are we
I
getting
might even
partners?
play in it.
All that to say, there are feelings about what's going on. The pickleball is just part of the project, and finding out this week that this project has been talked about for almost 10 years, put it in a whole different light for me. This is not something new. This is something talked about for a very long time. Another thing that would be underfunded or unfunded would be the Festival Street project down there by the historic Vern's Tavern, down along that area where Vern's more attractive place. But then going to 2023, I've broken them down into three categories. We've got the city parking improvements. That would be things like the Wildman lot on Cleveland Avenue, getting that paved and getting it acceptable for public parking. The Wolffield wing lots, where people park, but it's creating a lot of damage, a lot of maintenance. Vineyard public space, which you will probably start hearing more about. That will create a little bit more parking. The Kimball and Arthur project, where we anticipate that the developer there, each corner from Flying In, is going to ask for a little bit of assistance in making public parking available in some form or fashion in that project. We haven't seen it yet. We don't know. We're kind of, and then the new parking area that we bought across the street here at 510 Arthur. That's going to need to be repaired, ready for full-on public parking. Right now, it holds about 35 cars in capacity. After the building comes down and probably 50 to 55 cars. Those will be parking improvements. The next will be infrastructure improvements. Imagine having to cut the funding for the roundabout at Florida and the new Van Buren Park out there on Marble Front. We anticipate a request for help on the North Branch irrigation area into North Branch Business Park. We haven't heard from former Mayor Nancolis yet, but that's going to be an ask. Fiber optics line going from Simplex Stadium to Wolffield. Median paving. Our own Rob McDonald, Sacred Park. He and his team are out there taking care of the a dangerous place. Then we've got workflow improvements. This is where the rubber meets the road, because with a reduction in the levy rate would mean that we would have to seriously consider spending any kind of funding for Riverville or the TVCC remodel. That's a valuable project. I mean, that's something that really needs to be encouraged. Plus the moving expenses for moving from the old to new. And so, Mr. Mayor, what you had to say tonight about finding tax relief from an area other than the levy rate. Myself, my constituents, which I share in feedback for you, just want to say thank you. That's something that's very helpful. I've served with a wonderful team, and Brad and Chris are rock stars. Chris has that knowledge, and Brad is learning and asking questions and techniques to go and dig deeper. We have Steve Holt sitting in his room, who has helped build everything that Chris referred to a bit earlier. I really am very thankful for what you guys said. Saves us, and it allows the city to continue to make wise investments, not foolish investments, wise investments in things that are going to benefit the entire Caldwell context. Not only for the residents, but for the people that come to the city to spend their money. They make for better infrastructure, better parking, better parks. So, especially as this is the final thing song for urban renewal in its present form, and we have a chance to finish on an extraordinarily high note. We have had that or waylaid or laid aside for cutting the levy rate this year, because this is our sunset year. Really, that's tragic. So, yeah, thanks for the good news, guys. I really appreciate it. Good outcome.
Well, thank you. I'm glad that, thank you so much, Councilor Williams, for reminding us that you're back there and for coming and speaking. It was not a half hour, but it was well worth it, whatever it was. So we'll let you do that at home with Sharon, so she can do that. So, but no, that's great information. So we appreciate that and the presentation that you had. So,
The next thing Mr. Porter will do is he'll ask us to pass it later.
I know Councilor Williams mentioned when he was talking about Verdens about something about communion. So, so anyway, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, very good. So those are our two representatives on the Urban Renewal Agency, so we appreciate them doing that. Thank you so much. Appreciate that, Mr. Porter. Any other discussions or?
Question.
Yeah.
I can tell we're about ready to go, as am I, but I looked at those projects, and without urban renewal, most of them would be done. You can debate that. Just grant me that for now. Just grant me that for now.
Are you egging me on?
For argument's sake, let's say that. I guess one of the things that I think we also need to think about as we move forward in this new approach is, you know, how will we do those big projects? Part of it's bonding, right? And maybe there's already an answer to this. At what point do we bond? Do we have a point? Do we need to establish a point? And then at what point do we just pay to do it? And so I think, you know, I look at all those great projects and I think, wow, those are great projects. How are we going to continue that momentum in this community to build things like that, to build more parking, to do the things that we think that we need to do? So, you know, as we move forward, we talk about bonding for those projects, just to know at what level do we go to the voters, at what level do we decide here? So just some general food for.
No, and that's good food for thought. So that's something that we need to be thinking about. And so, yeah.
It's very nice that when we have the opportunity for the new fire apparatus, that we can just make that happen.
Yep.
You know, that kind of thing is extremely important.
Yep. No, I agree. So, yeah, for sure. Anything else? Counselor Register, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Very good. Just want to let you know that there's still plenty of food in the back. If you'd like to get some on your way out, you're more than welcome to do so.
Yeah.
Any other comments or discussion? Okay, well, I appreciate everyone coming again. I know this wasn't planned, but it was great discussion again tonight. So I think this whole budget workshops have been very successful, and we're excited for what the future holds. And obviously, there's going to be continued discussion. We do have the time to do that, so we'll make sure we get those things ironed out. And we may have to do an all-nighter one of these days just to get some things figured out. But that'll be a few months down the road. So let us catch our breaths and kind of go from there. So with that, then that ends this budget workshop. And again, thank you to everybody in attendance, and appreciate all the comments and presentations. And we will move forward with what has been proposed and look for that to come forward to City Council in the near future.